All right, so straight time pay is the hourly rate times the hours worked. The answer we get from that is called our gross income. The way we calculate it in an example is we take our amount of money we make per hour, multiply it by the number of hours worked. Important thing to remember, half an hour we represent as 0.5, a quarter of an hour, and you guys are going to see that in your textbook. They'll give you the 1/4, especially as we do 1.3, the time card activity, they'll start chunking 1/4 in there. That is 0.25, and just for fun, 3/4 is 0.75. If you want to think of it in terms of quarters, 1/4 is 25 cents, 3/4 is 75 cents, and half of a dollar is 50 cents. You can think of it in those terms. We did these problems where we take $7.60 times it by 40. I guess I did not get it into that, so let's find our calculator for that. $7.60 times 40 hours, we got $304. $7.90 an hour times 37 hours is $292.30. Make sure you guys put the dollar signs, especially when we're talking about money. Super important. And then our last one was $12.75 an hour times 35 hours and a quarter of an hour. And that one we had to round to the nearest penny. That was $449.44. I've never worked for an employer that paid me in partial pennies, so round to the nearest penny. Any questions on the video? All right, so 1.2 is overtime pay. If for most employers, our overtime happens after we work 40 hours. I believe labor laws prevent anyone under 18 from working overtime. I believe. I may be mistaken, but and then if you are in school currently and you're under 18, you definitely can't work. What's the hour cap? Is it 20?
It's 36.
Is it 36 when you're in school?
Yeah.
Okay. What about when during the?
Summer there's no restriction.
Okay. So summertime you can get to that overtime, but during the school year, the most a student that's under the age of 18 can work is 36 hours. Thank you. Great for helping us out. Okay, so when you work more than your regular hours, you might earn overtime pay. Please write this on your paper because it's going to happen. When you see the words time and a half, all that means is we're going to do the regular time calculation, so your hourly wage times the number of hours you work, but then you're going to multiply it by 1.5. We should have written this down yesterday. If you don't have it, make sure you have it now. Does everybody have a 1.2 note sheet?
Oh, damn, I found it.
Let's take a pause for just a moment, make sure we all have our notes. All right, so overtime pay. Overtime pay is your overtime rate. Overtime rate is your normal rate. That's just multiplied by 1.5 or 2 in some cases. If you're making double time, then it's multiplied by 2. So the overtime rate is whatever your normal rate is, whether that's $10 an hour, $12 an hour, $35 an hour, and you just multiply it by 1.5 if it's time and a half, or 2 if it's double time. Times the number of overtime hours worked. So sometimes this is going to require you to figure out how many overtime hours. And that's a simple minusing calculation. So if you worked 42 hours and the cutoff is 40 hours, show me with how many hours of overtime is that? Show me with your hands. It's 2. So that would be 2 hours of overtime at the overtime rate. Then when you want to do your total pay, it's your straight time pay plus your overtime pay. We're going to do this calculation like a bajillion times tomorrow when we do our stations. So another definition of overtime pay is when you work more than the regular number of hours, you can earn overtime pay. The overtime rate, called time and a half, is usually 1.5 times your hourly rate. You may receive an overtime pay rate of double time or twice your regular hourly rate. Employers often pay double time for Sundays and holidays, and when Mr. Mitch worked in the grocery store, he got triple time for working Christmas, New Year's, and 4th of July. So it's nice to get triple your regular salary. When we look at the example, our buddy here, Alan, he gets paid $8.20 an hour for a regular 40-hour week as a restaurant host. His overtime rate is 1.5 times his regular hourly rate. This week he worked 40 hours regular and 10 hours of overtime. What is his total pay? So his hourly rate is $8.20, so you guys write this down, times the 40 hours of regular hours he worked. 40 regular hours. So that's $328 in straight time pay. So his overtime rate is time and a half. If you guys have trouble seeing it all, feel free to move wherever you need to move to get closer. His overtime rate is at 1.5 times the $8.20 an hour. He worked 10 hours of overtime. So that's $123 just in overtime pay. Then to get the total, and please, guys, be careful. On a Chapter 1 test, it's going to ask you for certain types of pay. It might ask you just for the overtime pay. It might ask you for just the regular hours worked. It might ask you for the total pay. There's 3 possible answers for this problem that the question could be asking. Before you move on and away from this question, reread what the question is asking you. A lot of times my students know how to do something, know the nuts and bolts of this, but get it wrong because they're just trying to rush through. So my AppleGuard tip for the day is to reread the question before you move on to the next one. So I'm going to reread this question. What is his total pay? So in this situation, they want the total pay. Add those two together, 123 and 328, and he gets $451 total. We're going to take, I don't have my watch today. We're going to take a moment. I'm going to set the timer for 3, well, I'll give you 4 minutes. So 2 minutes per question to try this calculation on your own. So if you're at home, you can pause this recording. 9 times 40. $10. No, it's easy. Here, let me help. There's no, we are just who we are. Okay, so 9. Give me a 9. And then the time. That's what I want. 6. Give me a 9er. 5. Here we go. All right. While I'm writing that down, work on this one. Just do all 3, one single calculation. So, throw your calculator a 9. A 9. All right, we get 81. And we add those 2 together because we're finding
441.
the total pay. You guys agree? Give me a thumbs up if you think it's 441. For those of you at home, everybody agrees? All right, now we have our buddy Ed. Makes $11.50 an hour. He worked 36 regular hours, so his employer pays him overtime after that 36 hours. So he has a pretty sweet deal. Does anybody know what it's called when an employer gives you something that's above and beyond normal? So that's a good idea. Usually it's called either like a benefit. So one of the benefits of working here is you get overtime after 36 hours. Or a perk. One of the perks of working here is you get a company car to drive around. So one of the perks of Ed's employer is that he makes overtime after the 36 hours. So he works 7 hours of overtime. So he makes those 7 hours and then time and a half. Thankfully, multiplication doesn't care which order you multiply stuff in. So I can multiply the 1.5 after the 7, or I can multiply it before the 7. So when you do the math on these guys, you got 1150 times the 36, you get 414. Then we have our overtime, which is our 1150 times our time and a half, that's the 1.5, times our 7 hours. So that's 120 and 75 cents. His total pay is those two items added together. So it's the 120.75 plus the 414. Give me a thumbs up if you got 534.75. Thumbs up. Give me thumbs. Everybody's a Fonzie today. You guys are doing great. I'm going to give you the double Fonz. Hey. Okay. And that is 1.2. The formula for this time cards activity is completely ridiculous. And I apologize in advance for this formula. The total hours you work are the sum of the daily hours. I know. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to take a pause break for a moment. When you work for a business that pays on an hourly basis, you are usually required to keep a time card. Time card shows the time you reported for work and the time you departed by each day. With somebody raising their hand and me calling on them, what does the word sum mean? Is it a delicious Asian meal? Is it a part of dip sum? No, Jacob? What is it?
It's like addition.
It's addition. Go ahead and give me a thumbs up if that's what you're going to say too. Yeah. So sum means adding. You can add all of your daily hours together. The hard part is calculating the hours you work. So I'm going to give you your tip for today, and on the problems we're going to face in time cards is you will never round up to the amount of hours you work. So if I worked 35 minutes, I'm never going to round that up to 45 minutes. That's going to round back down to a half hour. That makes sense? So if I worked 50 minutes, that's never going to round up to a full hour. 60 minutes, that's always going to round back down to 45 minutes.
I would just work an extra 2 minutes.
You're restricted to whatever your employer is telling you. So we're going to encounter some problems where people are going to take their breaks at weird times. But we're going to have to really evaluate, did they work a full, and we do things in quarter of an hour, so either 15, 30, or 45-minute increments. And we wrote that down on our paper. So we're going to write those down again, because we're going to need them. So we're going to write quarter of an hour. How many minutes is a quarter of an hour?
15.
It's not 25. It is, Ernesto,
Oh,
15 minutes. That's why we're writing it down. It's not naturally in our soul. Half hour is 0.5 as a decimal. And how many minutes is a half hour? 30. 3/4 of an hour.
45.
0.75. I guess. And it's 45 minutes. I don't want you guys to end up at your employer and looking like a fool, because if you look like a fool, I look like a fool. Because you, believe it or not, at the end of this school year, you will have my name stamped kind of on your soul, but as somebody who educated you, you're going to go out in this community, and they're going to be like, oh, Applegarth was your teacher, and if you don't know how to do stuff, then it makes me look bad. So I take everything you guys do personally, and I want you to look like, yeah, I'm an amazingly smart person. I know that 3/4 of an hour is 0.75 when I write it down on my timesheet, and it's 45 minutes after that. I want you to be savvy. Go represent our crew. All right. So we got Gail here. She worked some days this week. And the question, I completed, so we're going to answer how many daily hours she worked on the 18th, and how many total hours she worked for the week. So on the 18th, that's the Thursday date. Oh my goodness gracious. What is going on here? Why, Gail? Why does Gail have 2 time-ins and time-outs? Ashley? She took a lunch break, and unfortunately, when you take a lunch break, your employer does not pay you to sit and eat your lunch most of the time. If they did, that would be called a perk or a benefit. But for our purposes, our employer is not going to give us. So I like this. Your book gives you a little tidbit about how to calculate when you're going through time. I'm not going to lie to you. I completely ignore that and just use my fingers. So, but I want to go over it in case that's your mojo and that's how you like to do stuff. So when the start time is prior to 1 o'clock, and the end time is 1 o'clock or later. take attendance for Add 12 o'clock to the end time. So here we got 1:45, that's the plus 12 o'clock, minus 8:15. So they got 13:45 minus 8:15 is 5 hours and 30 minutes. Now let me show you the way I'm going to do it. And those of you guys at home, I'm just counting on my fingers. So I go 8:15, and I look at the clock when I do this. 9:15, 10:15, 11:15, 12:15, 1:15, and if I get to 2:15, I've gone over. So it's going to be 5 hours. And how much time is it between, and I look at the clock, between 15 and 45 minutes on the clock? How much time is in between that? 30. So it's 30 minutes. So I use my fingers to count 5 hours and 30 minutes. 5 hours and 30 minutes is 5.5. So she works 5.5 hours before she takes her lunch break. Then we have to calculate the time between 2:15 and 4:59. And let's see if they round it to that 1 minute. I think they might. So between 4 o'clock and 2 o'clock is 2 hours. So this is how they do it. And between 59 minutes and 15 minutes is 44 minutes. So I would go 2:15, 3:15, 4:15, and 5:15 is too much because we only went to 5:59. So that is 44 minutes beyond that. So I just count with my fingers. So that's 2 hours and 44 minutes. This guy is real close to 45 minutes, which we said was 0.75. So this is like 2.75. So 5.5 plus 2.75. And it says round to the nearest quarter hour. You think our employer is going to be okay giving us that 1 minute? As long as we're not late, I think they'd be okay. So 5.5 plus 2.75 gives us 8.25 hours. All right, so what your lovely book does here in the example, and what I'm not going to do, is it uses the fraction part of the numbers. So it uses the 1/4, 1/2, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go up here and convert all my hours that are the fractions into decimals. So I can put it in my calculator easily. When you add all these together, it should be 40. But, surprisingly enough, sometimes your employer is wrong, so we're going to double check. So when you add 0.25 and 5, that's 0.75, plus another 0.25, that's a 1.0. 1 plus 8 is 9, bless you. 9 plus 8 is 17, 17 and 7 is 24. 24 and 8 is 32, and 32 plus 8 is 40. So I agree with the employer that we worked 40 total hours. They added the fractions together, and yeah, I'm not going to do that. Anytime I can make it a decimal, I'm going to make it a decimal. All right, so you guys, we're going to try these time calculations. I'm going to give you guys like 2 minutes. We're going to attempt the time calculations. We'll come back and make sure you got them correct all together. Okay, so the total number of hours for each person, and just in case you're curious, these are in the back of the book. So Reggie Blanco, he goes from 8 a.m. to 10:45. So I know 8 to 10, so that's 8, 9, 10, that's 2 hours. And 45 minutes. I like to write that as a decimal. That's 2.75. Then he goes from 12:15 to 4:15. That's pretty straight up 4 hours, if you don't believe me. 1:15, 2:15, 3:15, 4:15. I just counted on my fingers. So that's 4 hours. So a total of 6.75 hours. Ruth worked from 7:30 to 11:55 and from 1 to 4:50. Let's see if we can't sneak out 45 minutes or 15 minutes from that. So 7:30, 8:30, 9:30, 10:30, 11:30 is 4 hours. And then from 30, which is the 6th, to 55 is 25 minutes. Let's see what we worked from 1 to 4:50. See if our minutes don't come out a little bit better. 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., that's 3 hours. And 50 minutes. So let's go ahead and add our hours together. That's 7, so 4 and 3, when we add them together, gives us 7 hours total. What is 25 plus 50? 75, so 75 minutes. 25 plus 50? 25 minutes and 50 minutes. That makes sense? Doing it a little bit differently. So 75 minutes, how many hours are living within 75 minutes?
1.
1, because that's a 60 minutes. So once I take that 60 minutes out, how many minutes
15.
are left? 15. Okay, so that's 7 hours plus 1 more. So that's 8 hours total. And 15 minutes. So 8 hours, 15 minutes, or 8.25. Sometimes your lunch break doesn't happen at the most convenient time for keeping track of time. Just get to the end. Let's see where your hours end up and do those calculations. Okay, so that is it for today's notes.